Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fan fiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
Kanagakur no Sato, Council Chambers. How did the preliminaries go? Hokage-sama asked Hayashi Hyuga as the other clan heads nodded in agreement. They had been called into the meeting just after the end of the prelims. As such, they never got to hear what happened from their children. Sarutobi sighed as he knew that some of what he had to tell them was going to cause an outrage. Everything went smoothly for the most part, except for a few deaths, said Sarutobi, as many of the civilian council raised their eyebrows at this. Being rich civilians, they were in the mindset that nothing bad could ever happen in the village, so long as they had ninja there to protect them, let alone someone dying. In total, we had 3 deaths, 1 from the new village Odo, and 2 from our own village. That caught everyone's attention, especially the clan heads that hadn't been able to see their children before they came to the meeting. Who all has died, Hokage-sama? Asked Choza as he tried to remain calm in front of his leader, but his instincts as a parent were starting to take over. Seeing that all of the clan heads were almost to the point of hysterics, though they hid it well, Sarutobi decided to put their minds at ease. Don't worry. None of your children were among the deceased, he said as all of the worry left the clan heads to be replaced by an overwhelming feeling of relief. The fatalities were Dosu Kinyuda of Odogakure, Misumi Tsurugi of Kanahagakure, and Sai of Kanahagakure. Danzo's eye widened slightly when he heard one of his best operatives' names on the list of the deceased. How is that possible? Sai was one of my best. He was easily at the level a newly appointed Jounin. Who could possibly have the power and skill to kill him? He thought before the voice of his rival brought him out of his thoughts. As best as I could tell, their deaths were quick and efficient. Dosu Kinyuda, well Tagara of the desert, who seems to have a unique control over sand. He used this ability of his to wrap Dosu in a cocoon of sand and then crushed him to the point where there were no remains of the boy, said Sarutobi, as the civilian council all had disgusted looks on their faces and were probably close to losing their lunch. The shinobi council, though, was intrigued with this ability. Elemental Kekiai Gunkais were not all that rare, but one that granted the user control over sand was news to them. We'll have to look into this new ability, was the general thought process of the Shinobi Council. Misumi's death, however, was at the hands of one of the Kumo Kunoichi. This news brought scowls to the faces of the Shinobi Council. First, Kumo had the gall to kidnap the last heir of the Namikaze and Uzumaki, and now they kill one their aspiring genin? The Kunoichi, Karui, Naruto's other team, mate was the one who killed him. She used a technique called Kumo style, whirlwind dance, that allowed her to literally shred Misumi to pieces, said Sarutobi, spitting the words teammate. However, it was the death of young Sai that has disturbed me the most. Danzo raised a questioning eyebrow at this. How had the death of his operative disturbed the famed god of shinobi and the professor? You see, he died at the hands of young Naruto. Of all the things the council was expecting, that was certainly not one of them. That Naruto could kill someone his age, let alone someone who should be one of his allies, just reaffirmed to the shinobi council that Kumo had brainwashed the boy to the point where he was just a mindless killing machine. But that's not all. It was the way in which Naruto killed young Sai that has me extremely worried. For you see, it would appear that Kumo has given Naruto the Black Lightning in hopes to corrupt the boy with power. Everyone on the Shinobi Council's eyes widened at this revelation. If the boy truly did command the Black Lightning, then getting him back into Konoha and under their control was going to be about 100 times harder than before. Danzo was deep in thought over these new revelations. If the boy was strong enough to defeat one of his most powerful and loyal operatives, then he must be a truly frightening shinobi. Now factoring in having the Black Lightning at his disposal, and even he was beginning to fear what this boy might become. Even if the boy did kill one of our shinobi, it just means that we must move as soon as possible to return the boy to his true home and reverse all the damage that Kumo has done to the boy, said Inoichi, as he watched the fire return to his fellow clan head's eyes, as well as the eyes of the Hokage. Inoichi is correct. We must make plans to return young Naruto to the village, said the Hokage. However, the civilian council, who had been unnaturally quiet throughout the entire meeting, decided to speak up. We will not allow that demon to return to the village. You said it yourself, Hokage-sama. He killed one our shinobi, so he should be executed immediately, screeched the ever-annoying banshee that was Suki Haruno. My daughter hasn't had a peaceful night's sleep ever since she returned from that mission in Wave. I don't know what he did, but that demon did something to my daughter, and I demand that he pay for what he's done. She was about to continue before an extreme blast of killing intent flooded the room, all of it concentrated on her. I would suggest that you shut the hell up, said Sarutobi in a voice that froze the blood of everyone in the room. Even Danzo had to suppress a shudder at the tone. Naruto may not be a part of this village for now, but my law about speaking of the QB still stands, and I will have you executed if you speak of it again. The seriousness in the old Kage's voice, along with an Umbu appearing behind her ready to carry out the deed, did what many thought impossible, silenced a pink-haired banshee. Now, as Inoichi said, plans must be enacted as soon as possible. How are the plans for having the clan heiresses seduce Naruto going? Smoothly. While I think most of us haven't had a chance to tell our daughters of the plan, I have already made arrangements to help remove the slut, said Hayashi, as Inoichi nodded in agreement. While they were the only clan heads that had daughters, they knew that the other heads were already moving to have their clan's daughters assist in the plan. I have arranged for a small team of my clan shinobi to act as an assassination team to remove her. I have also made arrangements for a team of assassins from my clan to aid in the removal, said Inoichi as the Hokage nodded in agreement. He knew that his Umbu could easily remove the threat. However, it was a good idea to have two clans that made up most of the village's assassination corps aid in the removal. However, I believe we should have a few backup plans in case, for some reason, the first fails. The other clan heads nodded in agreement. Their village hadn't earned the title of the strongest of the five without having backup plans in place. Inoichi-san is correct. We need a backup if something goes awry with the first plan, said Shibi Aburame in the monotone that his clan was known for. No one spoke for a while as each of the clan heads was in deep thought about ways to return the wayward blonde. The civilians were also deep in thought. However, their thoughts weren't revolving around return a blonde shinobi safely to the village. No, their thoughts were revolving around how they could get rid of the blonde as soon as he was returned to the village, or better yet, kill him. Shadowed corner of council chambers. Those manipulative sons of bitches. When the boss finds out about what they have planned, he's going to level this place. Although if Yujito-chan finds out, the clone shivered slightly at the thought of what his girlfriend might do. Judging from his reaction to Sai's death, Danzo is probably the one who ordered him to place that seal on me. Well, I guess I found my next target, thought Naruto glaring at the head the rude Umbu. I can't believe that the leaders of the strongest of the five would stoop so low just to get more power for the village. I mean, seriously, try to seduce me with girls I hardly know, have no physical appeal whatsoever, and are completely useless in a fight. Do they think my standards are that low? Or do they even think I have standards? You have standards? Said a chuckling demonic voice from his mind. Shut it, Karama. Or ITS back too, that dark corner of my mind for you, screamed the clone, which instantly shut the demon fox up. Calming down a little, he watched Shikaka Nara stand up, trusting Nara to be the first come up. With a backup plan. With the council. I have a suggestion, Hokage-sama, said Shikaku as he stood up from his seat. Kumo may have used it for power, but what if we used a loyalty seal on Naruto? In theory, the two different commands of the seals should cancel each other out and return Naruto's free will to him. Also, once he's free from outside influence, we should present him with his inheritance to help convince him to abandon Kumo. Sarutobi sat quietly contemplating the outcome of such a move, should they be forced to resort to it. After a few minutes of tense silence, the Hokage nodded slightly with a small smile forming on his lips. I agree, Shikaku. It might be a little risky, but if the outcome is what we want, will be well worth the risk, he said as the other clan heads and the elders nodded in agreement. Danzo smirked slightly. The very same plan he had tried to use against the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was now being officially approved by the Hokage himself. If the Hokage is approving this plan of action, then I can easily place one of my shinobi into the team sent to capture the boy and make sure they're the one to place the seal, he thought with his smirk increasing slightly. Very well. We will meet at the end of the week to discuss any other plans for returning Naruto to the village, said the Hokage before turning the clan heads, Inoichi and Hayashi specifically. Make arrangements for your daughters to begin seducing Naruto by tomorrow. The sooner we begin, the sooner Naruto will be back where he truly belongs. Sarutobi stood, along with everyone else in the room, before formally ending the meeting. If that is all, then this meeting adjourned. Like hell it is. With Team 20 same time. So Sensei, what's the plan for the next month? Asked Karui as she and her team walked back to the hotel they were staying at. They knew that Kakashi and the others were following them, as per their orders from the Hokage, but they'd rather it be them than regular Konoha Anbu. I've already sent a message to the boss. He's sending Bee and Dodai ahead of him to assist in your training for the month-long break, said Darui as they arrived at their hotel room. Once Naruto had sealed the door using a basic Uzumaki seal, they opened the window to allow Naruto's siblings in. After everyone had a chance to settle in, Kakashi decided to start off the conversation. Well, it seems Sasuke isn't exactly happy about not being able to copy any of the techniques that were used during the prelims. Before I could stop him, he and his loyal lapdogs had already demanded a meeting with the Hokage and were being escorted by Anbu. When they discover the seal you gave me, they'll demand its removal immediately. Guy, Kurenai, and Anko all looked slightly worried about this. If the council discovered whoever created that seal, then things would get really bad, really fast. To the surprise of all of them, Naruto just chuckled slightly before reclining against the back of the couch he was on. So we have a spoiled brat throwing a temper tantrum, two love-struck puppies complaining about something that doesn't concern them, running to a group of morons who think they can do whatever they want. I don't really see a problem with that, especially not with the plan that I will be putting into motion soon, he said as he watched the varying reactions from everyone present. Yujito and Karui just treated this like any other situation involving their blonde teammate. They learned fast that with him around, things are never normal. Darui just sighed quietly. His successor was always unpredictable, but he never thought that he would try something that involved going against the Kage. Apparently, he forgot who his successor is exactly. Kakashi looked intrigued with this little announcement. His little brother had something up his sleeve that he believed could get one over on the Konoha Council. This next month is going to be very interesting. His fellow Jounin, however, still seemed concerned for their brother, though they looked willing to wait and see how things went. "What exactly do you have planned, little brother?" asked Kakashi as he watched a foxy smirk the size of the QB himself spread onto the blonde's face. "Oh yes, things are definitely going to be interesting. Council chambers. Like hell it is." The council stood rooted in place as the owner of the voice stepped out from the shadows. The whisker-marked blonde stood before the entire council with his arms crossed and a scowl on his face. It took everyone present, including the hidden Umbu, a few seconds to recover from their shock, but once they did, all hell broke loose. The Umbu that were tasked with security launched from their places all around the room, trying to subdue the blonde and hopefully kill him by accident. The second the civilians realized who the voice belonged to, they began shouting at the Umbu to kill him. The clan heads moved to intercept the Umbu, hoping to stop them from making the biggest mistake of their lives. Saratobi stood frozen as he watched the scene unfold before him. He couldn't believe that the one he thought of as his own grandson had been spying on the meeting. Shacking off his shock, he tried to bring order back to the chamber, keyword being tried. The Umbu were too consumed by their hate to listen to their leader, and the clan heads knew that if they didn't stop the Umbu, then they would lose the last heir to two of the most powerful clans to grace Konoha. Naruto just stood and watched as 6 Umbu, each with swords drawn, raced towards him with the full intent of ending his life. Turning his head slightly, he noticed the clan heads racing in his direction as well. Judging by the speed they're moving and the fact they aren't fighting each other to get to me, they're probably trying to stop the Umbu, he thought before he noticed the Umbu were almost on top of him. Time for phase 1. With the Hokage. Saratobi could only watch as the bare-masked Umbu swung his sword and cleaved the young blonde's head from his shoulders. At that very moment, everything finally hit home for the aged Kage, his surrogate grandson. The legacy of his successor was well and truly dead. He had failed as a Hokage, and he had failed to protect the only son of 2 people he thought of as his own. Minato, Kushina, I failed you. I couldn't protect Naruto. The civilians burst into cheers when they saw Naruto's head fall from his body. They were finally rid of the demon that had attacked their village all those years ago. They had avenged their loved ones and their fallen leader. Each was thinking that they would have to change the date of the village's annual festival from the day that the QB was defeated to the day that the demon was finally killed. This Umbu will be hailed as the hero of our village, the slayer of the QB, was the general thought process of most of the civilians. The clan heads were frozen in place. They couldn't believe that the legacy of 2 of the most powerful ninja to come from their village had been killed by one of their Umbu, no less. If it was the last thing they did, they would make this particular Umbu suffer for the rest of his life, and anyone who tried to stop them would meet the same fate. Everyone was brought out of their thoughts when they heard the sound of a throat being cleared. Turning to the source of the noise, they all noticed Danzo sitting in his seat with a very calm expression. The reactions to this varied all around the room. The civilians believed he was just happy that the demon was dead. The clan heads were enraged that he could just sit there so calmly treating the situation as if it didn't matter at all. At the Hokage, however, who found his voice first, and he wasn't exactly happy. How can you be so calm about this situation? One of our own Umbu just killed the only heir to the Namikaze and Uzumaki clans. Not to mention this could lead to potential war between us and Kumo. The death of one of their shinobi at the hands of our Umbu will not go over well, screamed the Hokage as his killing intent leaked from his body in waves. Danzo just turned to his old rival and smirked slightly. It wasn't his normal dark or plotting smirk, though. It was a fox smirk. You know, old man, I'm surprised that your so-called elite Umbu couldn't detect a simple substitution jutsu, he said with a chuckle. Saratobi looked confused for a second before Danzo vanished in a puff of smoke, putting every shinobi present on the defensive. When the smoke cleared, it revealed a very familiar and very much alive Whisker marked blonde shinobi. I am curious, though, as to how they became Umbu if they couldn't even detect a simple jutsu that most seasoned genin can detect. Before anyone had a chance to recover from their shock, the distinctive sound of another poof of smoke came from behind them. Slowly, they all turned to the source of the sound, only to see the headless body of Danzo, Shimura, lying in a growing pool of its own blood, his disembodied head staring at them, a look shock forever etched on his old face. Turning back to the source of all of the commotion, Sarutobi was the one to break the endless silence. Naruto, why would do something like? He asked, shock and disbelief filling his voice. Naruto just snorted before he glanced around the room, taking in everyone's reactions to the current situation. The civilian council looked disgusted at the body that lay dead at their feet, but they were doing their best to ignore it by glaring at him with all the hate they could muster. And even if he couldn't see their faces, he was sure the Umbu had similar reactions. To be expected, they always did blame me for everything that ever went wrong in their lives, even if I wasn't even in the village at the time. The Shinobi Council seemed to having reactions the exact opposite to those of the Civilian Council. They actually smiled slightly when it finally sank in that Danzo was dead, and they were looking him as if he was the savior of the world or something. The Hokage, however, was a completely different type of reaction. He didn't even seem to notice the body of his one-time rival that lay not 5 feet away from him, instead choosing to look at him with relief mixed with a bit of disappointment in his eyes. Why? Because he tried to have Sai place a loyalty seal on me that would make me loyal only to him. I killed Sai before he got the chance, and I just cut the head off the cobra before he could strike again. If his plan was successful, it would have interfered with my plan, said the blonde while he relined back in the seat he now occupied. Sarutobi and the Shinobi Council raised their eyebrows at this, each wondering the same thing. What the hell does he mean by his plan? Seeing the question looks he was getting from the Naruto side before he returned his attention to his audience. The first part of Phase 1 is complete, and now for the second part. I infiltrated this meeting to make sure you weren't planning something that could interfere with my plan. It looks like I made the right choice. Your plan to remove Yujito-chan from my side won't work, and you won't need to use a loyalty seal on me either. Shikake-san was correct in saying that 2 loyalty seals on one person. Giving 2 different commands would cancel one another out. However, I already broke free from the seal that Kumo placed on me when they kidnapped me. What? How did you break the seal? Asked Sarutobi as relief flooded his system, and it showed as his posture instantly relaxed, believing that Naruto was of no threat to him and that he would ask to be returned to the village immediately. Said blonde noticed this and had to hide his smirk. Old fool, he's do exactly what I want him to. How I broke the seal's control is of no concern right now. What is important is that I warn you not to interfere with me and my team while the exams are still taking place. Doing so will put my plan at risk, and if I'm discovered, the consequences won't be pretty. As the old man told you earlier, I can wield the black lightning, but what you don't know is that ever since I broke the seal, I have been secretly collecting and copying scrolls containing information on every technique that Kumo has at its disposal. I only need a few more months to finish gathering everything, and once I have it, I plan to leave the Kumo and return here to my true home. Gonna be sick, boss will probably hurl after I dispel. No one could believe their ears, even the civilians, and Umbu couldn't argue against the idea of allowing Naruto to return to the village if he was bringing that much knowledge with him. The clan heads were over the moon with excitement at the idea of getting their hands on every jutsu and technique that Kumo had. Sarutobi was indeed pleased with the idea of getting all those new jutsu, but what was the true joy for him was that his surrogate grandson would be returning to the village soon. Very well, Naruto. We will not interfere with your plan. I only ask that you meet with us as much as possible while you are in the village to keep us up to date with your progress, said the aged Kage, as the rest of the council, even the civilians, nodded in agreement with his statement. I'll come whenever I can, but I make no promises that I will be here regularly. My sensei is going to be training my team and I for most of the month-long break to help prepare us for the finals. However, I do have one request, he said as the Hokage nodded, signaling him to continue. I ask that you give me access to my birthright, my clan's compound here in the village, and access to the Hokage's personal library so that I can increase my knowledge of seals. Of course, Naruto. I will have Kakashi bring a map and the keys to your compound to you later on this evening. As for the library, I will leave instruction on where to find it and how to open it with the map Kakashi will bring to you, said the old man with his typical grandfatherly smile on his face. Hook, line, and sinker. He must be getting senile in his old age to not only give my access to the library, but to give me its location as well. That or he's just plain stupid, thought Naruto as gave the Hokage a fake smile before he stood up to leave. I'll come by as soon as I can to report on my progress. Until then, I'll send reports to you via my siblings. I have to go before my team starts to wonder where I am. Oh, and before I forget, Sasuke Uchiha will be by soon demanding that someone examine him since he can't access his chakra. Before he start pointing fingers in the wrong direction, I was the one who gave Kakashi Nezen the seal the block of his chakra. The reason I did it was because I didn't want my hard-earned techniques and skills stolen by an arrogant brat with a tree up his ass, he said before walking out the doors, with a cubified smirk etched on his face. Phase 1 complete. Now to let the boss know to proceed to Phase 2. The clone thought before dispelling in a poof of smoke after making sure he was alone. With Team 20. The real Naruto was sitting telling his team and siblings about his plan when he stopped all of a sudden with a slight glaze in his eyes. Kakashi and Naruto's team recognized what was happening instantly. He was going through the memories of a clone that had just dispelled. He stayed that way a few minutes before his broke out of his daze and began cursing up a storm. When he finally calmed down, he was greeted with the sight of his red-faced siblings and team. Sorry about that. It's just some of the things that Clone heard didn't really sit well with me, he explained. It seems the old man was planning to use the daughters of the clans to try and seduce me to give me a connection to the village. And if that were to fail, they were going to put a loyalty seal on me to get me stay in the village. My clone made sure they wouldn't try anything, though I doubt that's going to stop the clan heads from trying to get their daughters to seduce me, so their clan get my clan's power. Before he could continue, however, he was cut off by a huge spike of killing intent courtesy of his enraged girlfriend. If any of those useless sluts try to get anywhere near my Naruto coin, I'll rip their throats out, she said, her voice taking on a demonic edge as her anger kept rising. Everyone slowly started backing away from the enraged Jinchuriki as she slowly started to leak out demonic chakra. Naruto didn't waste any time. The second she let out the first little bit of demonic chakra, he was over to her, and before anyone had time to say a thing, they were gone in a shunshin. What the hell just happened? Asked Anko after she got her bearings back. She turned to her fellow Jounin only to see them just as confused as she was. They all turned to Karui when she let out a relieved sigh mixed with exasperation. Darui-sensei, you might want to postpone our training until the day after tomorrow. Judging from Yujito's anger this time, those two won't be back until midnight at the earliest, she said before she turned to face the four Konoha Jounin. You guys might want to return to your regular duties. Whenever one of them gets that angry, it usually takes about 5 hours of making out for the other to calm the pissed off one down. After she finished, Kakashi lasted maybe 1 second before he started giggling like a little schoolgirl with a blood stain growing on his face mask. Guy ran out of the room, screaming something about the two blondes dampening their flames of youth with such unyouthful acts. Kurenai, despite her Ice Queen exterior, blushed so red you could easily mistake her for a ripe tomato. Anko, though, had a similar reaction to Kakashi. A little bit of blood dripped out her nose, but instead of giggling, she decided to comment on the situation. Damn, my little brother's already getting the kind of makeout session, and he's only 13? Lucky bastard's probably going to get laid before he's 15, she said with a smirk as Kurinai's blush deepened and Kakashi was propelled out the window that was still open by a huge nosebleed at the image that his perverted mind came up with. Deciding to save the teasing for when the victims were actually present, Anko grabbed Kurinai by back of her bandages of dragged the stunned Jounin out of the apartment and towards her favorite bar. Well, I'm going to bed. Knowing those two, they'll probably fall asleep wherever they're at right now, said Darui as he moved to his room to get some rest. Karui nodded in agreement and went to her own room with one last thought before she fell asleep. Anko was probably right about those two laying each other before they're 15. I just hope they don't make me an aunt before I'm 18. Hyuga Compound, main house. Hayashi sat across from his eldest daughter, who seemed annoyed at being interrupted during her training. My daughter, I have a mission for you, said Hayashi, catching Hinata's attention. During the prelims, did you see someone by the name of Naruto Namikaze? At Hinata's nod, he continued, he is the son of my old rival Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, and Kushina Uzumaki, the Red Death. Your mission is to seduce him so that we can get the power his clan possess for our own clan. You are to use whatever means necessary to seduce him, though you will have one minor obstacle to remove. The blonde slut that Kumo has put on his arm has to be removed. I have arranged for a team of assassins to assist in the removal, but I won't send them in unless you are unable to remove her yourself. Do you accept this mission, daughter? He asked, only to watch a smirk that could only be described as feral spread across Hinata's face. Of course I accept, father. With a lineage such as his, he is the only male in this village is worthy of me. The slut won't be a problem either. What could she possibly have compared to me? The heiress of the most prominent clan in Konoha? Don't worry, father. By the end of the Chunin exams, Naruto-kun will be mine, and the slut will be dead, she said before she got up and left to continue her training, her smirk never faltering. Finally, a man worthy of me. Don't worry, Naruto-kun, soon you'll be right where you belong, by my side as it should be. Naruto walked through the forest behind the Hokage monument with his team and siblings following him. Kakashi had delivered the map to his clan's compound that morning along with instructions to the Hokage personal library. He and Yujito had returned early that morning only to be greeted by a smirking Anko and Kakashi, who hadn't let up in their teasing one bit since they left the apartment. I still can't believe that you're getting a 5-hour-long makeout session, and you're only 13. Man, I said it last night, and I'll say it again. You're going to get laid by the time you're 15, said Anko, while Kakashi started giggling with a slight bloodstain on his mask. Said blondes blush crimson for about the 100th time that morning. I swear, if this is the teasing we get when we go make out, then I don't want to imagine what Nason will do when we actually do it, thought Naruto as he continued to lead them through the lush forests of Konoha. Knock it off with the teasing, sis, or I'll tell everyone your secret little fantasy, said Naruto with a smirk playing at his lips. Anko shut up instantly, a shocked look on her face. You wouldn't really do that, would you, little brother? She asked with a nervous laugh. The mischievous fox smirk on her little brother's face was the only answer she got. The little brat is starting to take after me more and more. They continued their journey in silence after that, with the only sound being that of Anko's murmuring about evil little brothers with big mouths. After another 20 minutes of walking, they came upon the beautiful sight that was the entrance to the Namikaze clan compound. Instead of the fancy iron-crafted gates that the other clan compounds were known for, the entrance to the Namikaze compound was a traditional torii gate with a brick wall surrounding the rest of the compound. At the top of the gate was the Namikaze clan symbol. 9 tomo, surrounding the kanji for shinobi, was carved into the wooden face of the gate in gold. No one spoke for what seemed like hours, but in reality were only a few minutes before Kakashi decided to break the silence. Naruto, the gate is sealed with a blood seal that can only be released with the blood of a Namikaze or Uzumaki. Your mother and father were like parents to me. I spent most of my time when I wasn't on missions here with them. Your parents were true master of the art of sealing. With their combined knowledge and skill, they managed to create the barrier that protects the compound. I still remember the first time your father showed me how the barrier worked. And to this day, I am still amazed at what they created. The barrier around your compound is the ultimate defense, unbreakable except to those who know the secret behind it. Naruto, you need to stand in front of the gate and smear your blood on the seal in the center of it. Kakashi explained to amazement and confusion of everyone else. There wasn't any seal on the gate, just the opening that led into the compound. Hey Kurama, lend me your eyes for a second, said Naruto to his tenant. You got a kit, came the demonic reply from the fearsome Kyuubi. Naruto closed his eyes and felt the familiar prickling that signaled the change. Opening his eyes revealed the blood-red iris with slitted pupil and black sclera. Looking at the Torii gate now revealed a light blue barrier preventing anyone or anything from entering the compound. His eyes widened when he saw the blood seal in the center of the barrier, seemingly floating in the air. Shacking off his momentary shock, Naruto stepped up to the invisible seal and, after biting his thumb, smeared his blood on the seal, watching as it glowed for a split second before disappearing along with the portion of the barrier around the gate. While all this was going on, Kakashi had uncovered his Sharingan, so he could watch the barrier's reaction to his little brother's blood. Yujito had followed her boyfriend's example and used Matatabi's eyes to see the barrier and was suddenly hit with inspiration when she saw the energy moving through the barrier as if blown by a gentle wind. Kitten, that's a brilliant idea, though it will take a long time to complete with all the factors that have to go into it. First, you need to be much more proficient in my special jutsus, and second, you'll need to be a borderline master of seals, or at least the barrier aspect of them, said Matatabi, as Yujito mentally nodded in agreement. Yeah, and that would mean more quality time with my Naruto-kun. She thought as an image of her and Naruto studying seals together entered her head, only to regret immediately as her perverted tenant started teasing her and warping her original image to one of her in Naruto. Doing some very perverted things in a public library. Mata, we're too young for that end. Who the hell would doing something like that in public other than you? Hey Yujito, wake up, shouted Karui, snapping her out of her thoughts with her tenant. Huh, what? Was her intelligent reply as she tried to get her bearings back. I said, come on, everyone's already exploring the rest of the compound, she said before grabbing her female mate's hand and dragging her through the gate. The sight that greeted them was one they wouldn't soon forget. The main house of the compound was at least 3 stories tall and was built in the traditional Japanese style. The walls were a stained black wood with some intricate designs carved into the columns in the corners of the house. The roof was made out of obsidian black tiles that gleamed in the light of the noonday sun. Off to the side of the house, they could see a large lake with koi fish swimming just below its surface. Whoa, breathed the 2 stunned kunoichi. The house seemed to give off an aura of comfort, and yet there was an underlying feeling of dread for anyone who wasn't welcome. Hey, you two, check this out. The sound of their male teammate's voice knocked the 2 stunned kunoichi out of their stupor. Running to where they heard Naruto's voice, they found him standing with their sensei and his siblings looking out over the area behind the house. Behind the house was a training field easily the size of the Konoha Stadium with lush trees surrounding the area, helping it to blend in with the forest around them. Off to the side of the house, there was a hot spring that had Yujito and Karui almost drooling at the thought of the relaxing water working its magic on their bodies. Well, let's take a look inside. After that, I'm going to find my father's library, said Naruto as he walked back around to the front door with everyone following. When they reached the front door, Naruto used the key that Kakashi had given him that morning and opened the door for everyone to enter. The entry hall was fairly simple with a few paintings hanging on the wall. On their left was a doorway leading to a fairly large kitchen with a doorway to the living room just opposite the kitchen. Door. At the end of the hall, they could see a hallway leading to some back rooms with a staircase next to it. Let's get our things put away, then get some training done. We can explore the house later, said Naruto, as he moved towards the steps where Kakashi indicated the bedrooms to be. After everyone was settled into a room, with Naruto taking the master bedroom, they all met up in the spacious living room to decide on what their next move would be. Now that we're all settled, We can start your all's training for the finals, said Darui as he watched his team nod in agreement. Naruto, for now, see what you can find in your clan's library and train with that. Also, try and find out any information on where your ancestors might have hidden the Uzumaki vault. Yujito, see what fire jutsu you can find in the library and work with those until Dodai and be arrived to help. Karui, I can only teach you so much Kenjutsu since our styles are so different. But in the meantime, I'll train you in a few more water jutsu until we can find someone to help you with some more advanced Kenjutsu. Actually, Darui, I might know someone who can help with that, said Anko, catching everyone's attention. You probably don't know this, but Kurenai and I were on the same Jinin team along with Hei Gecko. We were taught by your mom Naruto, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. She was an expert in almost every field of the shinobi arts, and we each took after her in one way or another. I took after her in assassination and ninjutsu. Kurenai obviously took after her in jinjutsu, and Hei took after her in terms of kenjutsu, and he's the best kenjutsu user in the village at the moment. He came to me after the exams and asked me if Naruto was indeed Kushina Sensei's son. When I told him you were, he swore on his life as a shinobi to help you in any way he could. I think he would be more than happy to assist in your all's kenjutsu training. Naruto sat thinking for a few minutes before nodding his head. Turning to Anko, he gave her the okay to find him and bring him to the compound to help with their training. As soon as the words left his mouth, Anko and Kurenai were out the door in search of their teammate, their squeals of happiness still lingering in the air. Okay, those two scare me, said Karui as she suppressed a shudder. Everyone else nodded in silent agreement. It was scary how fast the two kunoichi could go from their Ice Queen persona to giggling, squealing teenagers. Well, while those two are busy, let's get started, said Naruto as he stood up. Kakashi, you and Guy head out and find the entrance to the Hokage library. After you know where it's come get me, and we can begin phase 2 of the plan. With a nod from the Jounins, they left in a shunshin to begin their search, knowing that their little brother's plan couldn't go forward without the library. Yujito-chan, let's head to the library and start our studying. Karui, when you're done with Darui Sensei, you can join us. Okay? With that, the blonde couple walked toward the back of the house, leaving their smirking teammate and Sensei in the living room. Let's hope they don't do anything naughty. Right, Sensei, said Karui as she watched the couple leave. Right. Well, I guess we better get started too, said Darui as he stood up and headed towards the training field in the back with his red-haired student following. With Naruto and Yujito. Our two favorite blondes had just reached the library and were having trouble keeping their jaws attached to their bodies. The library was huge. From what they could see, it was almost as large as the master bedroom, which took up a good chunk of the third floor. Somehow managing to pick his jaw up off floor, Naruto took a closer look around the library. Shelves upon shelves of books and scrolls lined the walls, and the middle of the floor all the way to the back of room, where he could just make out the outline of vault door. Come on, Yujito-chan, let's take a closer look, he said, breaking his still dazed girlfriend out of her stupor. Nodding in agreement, the two of them started to explore the library and figuring out where everything was and how it was all sorted. The first thing they noticed was that the scrolls and books were sorted by into the 5 major categories: ninjutsu, jinjutsu, taijutsu, sealing, and kenjutsu. The ninjutsu section was further sorted into the 5 elemental categories and non-elemental ninja arts. These sections were further sorted by the ranking of the jutsu, starting as low as D rank and going all the way to S rank techniques. The jinjutsu section was split into 2 sections, offensive and supportive, which were again sorted by rank. The taijutsu section was sorted into offensive and defensive styles, with a branch section for kenjutsu styles. The kenjutsu section, however, was only sorted by ranking, with the lowest rank being B rank. However, unlike the other sections in the rest of the library, this one was sealed behind a wall of glass with a blood seal in the center. The section on sealing was simply sorted into beginner, intermediate, and advanced sections. Well, what do you want to start with, Yujito-chan? Well, I'd actually like to start learning more about seals, specifically the barrier aspects of them, said Yujito, as she continued looking through the fire style part of the ninjutsu section and missed the what smile that appeared on her boyfriend's face. Yujito-chan wants to study sealing with me. This has got to be one of the greatest days ever, screamed Naruto in his head while a chibi version of him was doing a victory dance. Yeah, now you two will have more time together, and you can finally claim her as your mate, came the demonic voice of Kurama as he sent a mental image of Naruto and Yujito doing some very indecent acts in the Namake's library to his blonde container. Naruto had to clamp his nose closed to prevent being blasted back by the massive nosebleed that came with the image in his head. We're only 13. You pervert fox. We can't do anything like that yet. Yet, said Kurama with a raised eyebrow. That's it back to the dark. Corner of my mind for you. With that, Naruto cut the connection with his tenant with the screams of terror from the great QB lingering in his head. Well, if you want to learn sealing Yujito-chan, then I'd be more than happy to teach you the basics, said Naruto, only to receive a searing kiss courtesy of his very happy girlfriend. After Naruto managed to untangle himself from his still very excited girlfriend, he gave her his famous fox grin before taking out a scroll and unsealed the scroll that had the Uzumaki sealing basics in it. Well then, let's begin. With Darui and Killer, same time. Alright, Karui, for now I'll be teaching you a new Kenjutsu technique. This technique is unique because only people who have a natural affinity for lightning-style jutsu can perform it. It's called Kumo style, lightning saw. To perform this technique, you must channel your lightning chakra into Yu's sword and form it into a serrated edge along the blade. Once you have the chakra formed, you need to slash at whatever your target is while releasing the chakra in your blade so that it forms into a flying saw that is almost impossible to block. When you have the technique down, this should be the results, said Darui as he drew his cleaver sword and began channeling chakra into blade. If one looked close enough, they could see the faint outline of saw-like teeth along the edge of the blade, with the occasional arc of lightning flashing between the teeth. Raising his sword, Darui swung it at one of the many target dummies in the training ground behind the Namake's house. From the sword, a spinning saw of pure chakra launched at the dummy and cut through it like butter before dissipating into the air. This is a B-rank technique, and very difficult to master due to the incredible amounts of chakra control required to perform the technique. It will most likely take you the entire month to train this particular technique, but if Naruto's plan goes smoothly, then you will have many more techniques to learn from the Hokage library, and if he agrees, then hate himself. Alright, Sensei, I think I'll start training with that technique later on tonight. How about we work on another elemental jutsu for now? Asked Karui, while she mentally went through the steps she could take to help learn the lightning saw faster. We'll save elemental jutsu for when the whole team is together. For now, though, we'll work on increasing your chakra control by having you walk on water while sticking the tips of Senbon to your body with your chakra, said Darui as a sadistic smirk crossed his face, one that Karui recognized instantly. The only time Sensei ever gets that smirk on his face is when he plans on putting any us through one of his hell run training sessions, thought Karui as she took step back in fear of what her sensei had in mind for her training. I should have gone with Naruto and Yujito to the library, was Karui's last thought before she began her hellish training in chakra control. With Kakashi and Guy, same time. Are you sure we are going the right way, my eternal rival? Asked Guy, and the two jounin continued jumping from roof to roof. Positive Guy, Minato Sensei, once took me to the library to put the information regarding the Chidori and Raikiri into it as A and S rank assassination jutsus respectively. I don't remember the exact location, but I do remember the general area it's in, said Kakashi as they stopped on a roof a few blocks away from the Hokage Tower. We're close. There are 2 Umbu in the area, most likely guards to stop any intruders who manage to get this close. Looking over the area they were in, he noticed a small warehouse a block from their position. Remember Kakashi, sometimes the most powerful secrets are hidden in plain sight. The voice of his deceased sensei drifted through his mind as the memory of his time in the library surfaced. Flashback. Minato-sensei, I thought you said we were going to the Hokage library to add in my Chidori and Raikiri to the archives? Asked a young Kakashi. His sensei had told him that they needed to add in his two creations so that any future assassination specialist could have access to them for high-profile missions. This doesn't look like a place that would hide the village's greatest secrets. Chuckling, Minato turned to his prized and only remained student. Kakashi, don't you always say to look underneath the underneath? As shinobi, we must not take anything at face value, because nothing is ever as it seems. Remember, Kakashi, sometimes the most powerful secrets are hidden in plain sight, said the fourth Hokage as he led his silver-haired student into the small warehouse a few blocks from the Hokage Tower. In flashback. Found a guy, said Kakashi as said green spandex, wearing shinobi, moved over to look at the warehouse. Not exactly the place I would have chosen to hide the village's greatest secrets, he said as he continued to look at the building. Maybe, but it's like my sensei once said, sometimes the most powerful secrets are hidden in plain sight. Come on, let's get back to the compound. Naruto's going to want to start the second phase of his plan as soon as possible. Nodding in agreement, the two Jounin took off, back to the Namikaze compound, both eager to see what else their little brother had planned for their former village. Namikaze compound later that night. Team 20 sat across from Naruto's siblings in the living room of the Namikaze house, with one extra face present. Hayate Gecko sat in between his two former teammates, staring at Naruto with a pleading look in his eyes. Noticing the look in his new guest's eyes, Naruto decided to get things started. Hayate-san, my sisters say that you studied under my mother with them, and while I trust their judgment, I would like to confirm some things for myself, said Naruto, as Hayate nodded in understanding, silently asking him to continue. First off, if my mother was still alive and she had decided to leave the village for some reason, would you follow her, or would your loyalties stay with the village? Hayate, to everyone but Anko and Kurinai's surprise, didn't hesitate in his response. Your mother, Naruto, was the closest thing I have ever had to a mother. Like you, I never had the chance to meet my parents, but when I was placed on Kushina Sensei's team, I finally found the closest thing to a mother that I would ever know. She took me in, the same way Minato Sensei took in Kakashi. They were my family, and my loyalties to my family have and always will be greater than that of my village. No one spoke for a while, all of them overwhelmed by the emotion in Hayate's voice as he spoke of his former sensei. Anko and Kurinai had each grabbed one of his hands in the middle of his story. They knew how much their former sensei meant to him, so they did their best to try and comfort him. However, the silence didn't last long as Hayate, it seemed, wasn't finished yet. When I found out Sensei was pregnant with you, I was overjoyed, but that was nothing compared to the joy I felt when Sensei asked if I would like to be your big brother. But then the QB attacked. By the time I made it back to village from the mission I was on, Minato Sensei had already sealed the beast, and when I asked the third about it, he told me that Kushina Sensei had died in childbirth along with her son. After that, I fell into a depression that soon became an illness. I felt as if I had no reason to live. I just went through the motions of life, not caring or paying attention to anything. When I learned who you were during the prelims, I couldn't believe it at first. It felt too good to be true, but after Anko and Kurinai said it was really you, I was elated. I still had a chance to be the big brother I always wanted to be. And for that dream and in honor of my late sensei, I will follow you. Wherever you go, help to train you and your team in whatever I can. After what this village has done to you, they no longer deserve my loyalty. My loyalty now lies with you, my family. Naruto stood up at the end of Hayate's speech and walked over to the sickly Jounin, silent tears falling from his eyes. Kneeling before the swordsman, Naruto enveloped him in a brotherly hug, the joy of finding a long-lost sibling overwhelming the both of them. Anko and Kurinai could only smile at the scene, They had tried many times to convince Hate that Naruto was indeed Kushina's son, but every time he would ignore them, saying that Kushina's son was dead. To finally see the two together, as it always should have been, was enough to bring tears of joy to the eyes of the Ice Queens. Kakashi was smiling under his mask at the scene. He and Hade had been the closest things the other had to a brother because of their senseis. For him, seeing the two brothers united like they should have been from the beginning was almost too much for the famous copy ninja. Guy had anime tears running down his face at the scene. He had been trying for years to bring Hate out of his funk with his youthfulness only to fail. Now his little brother had finally done what he couldn't. In his mind, a chibi Guy was going on and on about his little brother's flames of youth. Pulling away from the hug, Naruto smiled at Hate before rejoining his team on the opposite couch. After that, I don't think any of my other questions are necessary. So let's get you caught up with everything that's been going on, said Naruto before going into a brief but detailed explanation of everything that had happened up to that point and what else they had planned for the coming month. At the end of the explanation, Hate couldn't hide the evil smirk that crossed his face at the thought of what his little brother had planned for the third Hokage. Payback's a bitch, you lying bastard, thought Hate as he continued to listen to his brother's plans and what they would be focusing on training wise for the month-long break. All right, now that everyone's been brought up to speed, I think it's time to begin phase 3 of the plan, said Naruto as he made a shadow clone and with a nod disappeared in Shunshin. While my clone gets things moving again, how about we get a little ninjutsu training in? With nods of agreement from everyone, they made their way out to the training field behind the house. Soon the Raijin will be back where it truly belongs, in the hands of an Uzumaki, thought Naruto as he watched Kakashi demonstrate a new wind technique he would be learning. Hokage Tower, after Clone left. Hiruzen Thurtobi sat at his desk, going through the endless paperwork that continued to appear. I swear, sometimes I wonder why I agreed to take this position, he thought as he stamped yet another document with his official seal. He was interrupted from his work when he heard the sound of a throat being cleared. Slightly startled that he hadn't sensed the person's arrival, he looked up into the smiling face of his surrogate grandson. Ah, Naruto, what can I do for you, my boy? Asked Sarutobi with a smile, though he was silently wondering how Naruto had achieved such advanced stealth abilities. To be able to sneak up on me is no easy feat. Little did he know. Naruto the answer to his question. Old fool must really be going senile if he didn't sense my approach. That or he thinks he doesn't have to worry about anyone trying to attack him while he's in the village. Actually, I have a request to make of you, said Naruto, catching Sarutobi off guard slightly. What do you know of the Raijin sword? Well, it is a legendary blade that is said to have been forged from a lightning bolt with the ability to cut through anything and everything it comes in contact with. My former sensei, the second, actually wielded the blade in combat many times. However, it was stolen from the village a few years back by a rogue ninja by the name of Aoi Rokusho, said Sarutobi, not caring if he was divulging village secrets to someone not even from his village. What? These fools allowed some useless traitor to steal an Uzumaki treasure. I swear if it's the last thing I do, this village will pay for its crimes against my clan. If it has been stolen, then I'm most asked that send out a team to retrieve the blade immediately. The Raijin is a key factor in whether or not my plan is successful. If I don't have it, then it could not only mean the failure of my plan, but also result in my death, said Naruto, as he watched the Hokage's face go from confused to horror in mere seconds. Senile old man is playing right into my hands. Don't worry, Naruto. I promise that by the end of the week you will have the Raijin in your possession. For now, why don't you go train for the finals, and if you run into any of your siblings, please send them to me immediately. They will be leading the mission to retrieve the Raijin for you, said the aged Kage as he signaled for his Umbu to go and find said Jounin. Thanks, old man. I'll try and contact you as soon as I can, said Naruto as he walked out of the room before dispelling with a smirk on his face and one final thought. Phase 3 has begun. Well, Naruto, I guess we'll be heading out now, said Kakashi as he and the rest of Naruto's siblings stood by the gate to the Namake's compound. Naruto had relayed the information from the clone he sent to the Hokage a few minutes ago, and the five of them had quickly gathered their gear and prepared to leave for the mission. Naruto nodded in understanding as he stood with his team. He understood that this was a critical part of his plan, but that didn't mean that he wasn't upset that his siblings had to leave for an undetermined amount of time. "Be careful and hurry back," he said as he gave each of them a hug and a kiss on the cheek in Anko and Kurenai's case. With a few final goodbyes, the five Jounin took to the trees headed for the Hokage Tower to receive their mission. Team 20 decided to get a little bit of training in before they went to the village's main gate to meet up with Bee and Dodai, who were due to arrive later that day. Once they reached the Namikaze's personal training grounds, Darui stood in front of them while they stood at the ready to start their training. "Well, this seems familiar," said Darui with a smile as he remembered his team's second C-rank mission. "Well, then let's get started. I think it's about time that you all learn some more advanced jutsu. I'll be teaching each of you a B-ranked jutsu. Karui, for this jutsu, you'll need a lot of water, so don't try and use it in a fight unless you have a substantial water source. It's one of the signature jutsus that all water-style users are known to have in their arsenal," said Darui before he started going through a lengthy chain of seals before finally ending in the bird sign. Water-style, water dragon jutsu. From the pond that was connected to the training ground rose a large dragon made entirely out of water. Its yellow eyes glowed with power before hurtling itself towards one of the many target dummies that was set up in the field. The effects of the jutsu were instantaneous. The dragon clamped down on the target while the rest of its body crashed into the target, completely destroying it. Karui had a hard time keeping herself from drooling as she watched what the jutsu was capable of. With that kind of power in her arsenal, no boy would dare try and smack her ass again. The main weakness of this jutsu is the long chain of seals necessary to perform it. So before you even attempt to use this jutsu in battle Karui, you'll have to get your speed with hand signs up to par. Now, Yujito, I've already taught you all the fire jutsu I know, so I'll be teaching you a lightning one instead, said Darui as he went through a considerably shorter chain of seals. Lightning style. Raising lighting jutsu. After he said this, the area around the target dummies began to shake violently before hundreds of large lightning bolts erupted from the ground in random locations and intervals, burning and destroying any target it came in contact with. This jutsu is one of the best ones to have in your arsenal if you ever find yourself facing someone who specializes in close quarters combat. The lightning will make it almost impossible for them to get near you without running the risk of being severely injured or killed by the lightning bolts. A perfect jutsu to have when you're facing someone. Like a Hyuga, Yujito nodded in agreement. It was definitely a jutsu that could come in handy in a fight against someone like Hinata. Naruto, I didn't plan on teaching you this A-rank technique until after the exams. But given the rising threats in this village and Orochimaru potentially being here as well, I'm willing to make an exception. The technique I'm going to teach you is a black lightning technique that can only be used with the black lightning. My signature technique, said Darui as he went through a couple of hand signs, while Naruto stood transfixed watching him. Sensei's signature technique, he couldn't mean. His thoughts were interrupted by Sensei's voice. Lighting style, Black Panther. Darui's body erupted with black lighting before a panther made of pure black lightning launched from his body and completely destroyed the target dummy it struck. Naruto stood transfixed at the display. His sensei had told him about his signature jutsu, but never would he have believed that he would be learning it so early on in his training to use the black lightning. When he first started his training, Darui had told him that every user of the Black Lightning had his own signature technique that they created once they had completely mastered the Black Lightning and would only teach it to their successor when they believed they were worthy enough. After going over the hand sings and the mechanics of each jutsu, they all set about learning their respective jutsu with determination set in their hearts. With Kakashi's group, Sarutobi looked over the 5 people who stood before him with a small smirk on his face. They were the 5 most powerful jounin that their village had at its disposal, but they were also the adoptive siblings to one Naruto, Uzumaki. Naruto is not ready for his father's name. He may live in his father's home, but he's still too young to handle the responsibility of taking the mantle of Lord Namikaze. He kept telling himself this every day. But now was not the time to dwell on those thoughts. Now he had to send these 5 elites on a mission that could determine the fate of Naruto, depending on its outcome. Thank you all for coming so quickly. I have a mission that is of great importance to the village, and more importantly, to Naruto himself, said the Hokage, as he watched the 5 Jounin instantly tense at this piece of information. What is the mission, Hokage-sama, and how does this concern our Otudo? Asked Anko, with concern clearly visible on her face. Inwardly, though, she was mentally patting herself on the back for putting on such a great performance. I should get an award for this, she thought before returning her attention to the Hokage as he began his explanation. The mission is an S-ranked retrieval mission. The target is Aoi Rokusho. You are to kill him and retrieve the Raijin that he stole from the village. Even though Aoi is only an A-ranked Rouged ninja, the importance of the mission is what makes it an S rank. Naruto's plan cannot succeed without the Raijin. If we want him to return to the village unharmed and with all the knowledge that he is gathering, he must have a Raijin to make Kumo think he is working with them and turning against us, said Sarutobi as he handed Kakashi the mission scroll. That scroll contains the mission parameters in greater detail, as well as whatever info we have on Aoi. You leave immediately. This mission must be completed before the finals of the Chunin exams begin. With a chorus of yes, sir, the 5 Jounin vanished in a swirl of leaves. With Team 20, 1 hour later. Our 3 favorite genin were currently practicing with the jutsu their sensei had demonstrated for each of them. Karui was standing in the center of the pond in the training ground soaking wet. She had been trying to get the jutsu down ever since her sensei showed it to her. So far she had managed to form a dragon, but it was only a few feet long, nothing near the monstrous size of the one her sensei had shown them. Cursing under her breath, she began going through the long chain of seals again, only to be met with another dragon barely 5 feet long. Yujito was bent over. Her breathing labored as she took a short break to observe her progress with her new technique. All around her were small holes that were the result of her many attempts at the rising lightning jutsu. While she managed to make the lightning break the surface, she hadn't managed to raise it any higher than about 3 feet, with barely enough electrical energy in them to give someone a good jolt as a wake-up call. Wiping her forehead, Yujito stood back up before going through the hand signs again. With a cry of lightning style, rising lightning jutsu, multiple lightning bolts about 2.5 feet tall broke through the surface of the training ground. When the jutsu died down, she let out a frustrated sigh before beginning the chain of seals again, mentally thanking her large chakra capacity. Naruto, if it was possible, was even more frustrated than both his team mates combined. While he had managed to surround his body with black lightning, it was only for a few seconds before the lightning faded back to its natural bluish HEW. While anyone else would consider this an amazing achievement considering the difficulty of the technique, to Naruto, it was almost insulting. The fact that his sensei had deemed him worthy of learning his signature jutsu before he was even a chunin was overwhelming to the blonde. That alone was more than enough motivation for him. But when you factored in the potential threat of Orochimaru, only someone with a death wish would try and interfere with the blonde's training. Let's take a break for a while, team. We need to go Might Be and Dodai at the gates, said Darui as his team begrudgingly stopped practicing their newest techniques and walked over to him. Come on, Bee and Dodai are probably already waiting for us, he said as his team nodded and began heading back towards the village, each of them muttering curses about not being able to get their jutsu down faster. Darui couldn't help but smirk at his team, despite the differences between the 3 of them. They were all ninjutsu specialists by trade, and not being able to get a jutsu down was driving them nuts. Walking through the village, Team 20 couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. They knew it wasn't Konoha Umbu, and they knew they weren't being followed, but the uneasy feeling of someone watching them just wouldn't go away. With Hinata, same time. Hinata stood on the roof of the main house in her clan's compound with her Byakugan activated and searching the village for her target. She had been trying to find him ever since her discussion with her father, and so far she hadn't been able to find any trace of him. At first, she had thought that he might have left the village to return to Kumo and train for the finals, until her father told her that participants in the finals of the exams were not allowed to leave the village. When she found that out, she redoubled her efforts in trying to find the elusive blonde. While unintentional, the constant searching she did using her Byakugan had helped to increase her range of vision with her dojutsu. Today, though, she had a feeling things would be different, that something was going to happen that would forever change life as her village knew it. Finally, she thought as a smirk crossed her lips, she had found her target. He was walking through the village square towards the gates with his team, and while she would prefer him alone, she would take whatever opportunity she could get. Jumping from the roof of her clan compound, she made her way towards Team 20 with every intention of walking away with a new boyfriend. With Team 20. The feeling of someone watching them seemed to only increase as they approached the gates. They were each preparing for a fight, when all of a sudden, Yujito's body went rigid and her hold on her boyfriend's arm tightened. Darui and Karui were worried. Not many things could cause Yujito to tense like this, especially with Naruto at her side, but when she did, it usually meant something bad was going to happen. Naruto, while worried, was also on high alert. He knew Yujito's body language almost as well as his own. Whenever her entire body tensed, it usually meant she sensed a powerful and threatening chakra coming towards them. But when her grip turned into a vice, it only meant one thing. Taking a sniff to confirm his suspicions, he smelled it, pheromones. Like the ones he had smelt coming off of Kiba in the prelims. These pheromones held no love, only lust. One drastic difference between these pheromones and the ones from the prelims was the fact that they were from a female, and a powerful one at that. Tightening his own hold on his girlfriend, Naruto tensed his muscles ready for anything, his sensei and team mate following his actions. They didn't have to wait long, as at that moment, Hinata Hyuga dropped down in front of them with a smirk on her face. "Hello, Naruto-kun," she said in a seductive voice that had Yujito growling dangerously at the arrogant heiress. Hinata, seemingly ignorant of the danger she was putting herself in, walked or more like strutted closer to our favorite blonde shinobi. "I'm curious, Naruto-kun, why would someone like you, who is heir to two of the most powerful clans in history, hang around no-name, clanless peasants like them?" asked Hinata as she wrapped her arms around Naruto's right arm and pressed it in between her ample B-cups. Karui and Darui tensed at this, not the intended insult itself, but they knew it would bring about. Glancing over at Yujito, they moved to interfere before it got out of hand, only to be stopped by a look from Naruto that showed he had the situation under control. Yujito was getting angrier by the second. This useless hussy had the nerve to call her boyfriend Naruto-kun, and now she wrapping herself around him like the slut she is. "I swear, if this bitch doesn't get away from my Naruto-kun, I'm gonna rip her fucking chest off," thought Yujito as she fought to stay, and her tenant wasn't exactly helping. That wench, if she thinks she can touch our mates like that, then she has another thing coming. Yujito used my chakra and turned this slut into charcoal. Mata, as much as I want to, I can't just go demon on her, because Yujito's thought were cut off when she heard the Hyuga whore talking to her boyfriend again. "I can understand you hanging around them out of pity, but why would you soil and degrade your name and date one of them? What does she have to offer you in your clan? She doesn't come from a prominent and influential clan, and her skills as a kunoichi are pathetic. I, on the other hand, am the heiress of the most prominent clan in Konoha. I was the top kunoichi in my graduating class, and not to mention I'm the most appealing girl in the village, while she's nothing but a flat-chested slut." Time seemed to slow down as Hinata continued talking. It stopped entirely with that last insult. Darui and Karui were scared out of their minds. First, this arrogant heiress tries to wrap herself around Naruto, with Yujito standing not a foot away, and now she just said the one thing that could set off the maelstrom that was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Yujito's attempts to try and stay calm shattered into a million pieces after Hinata finished her rant. That's IT. This bitch is going down, and she's going down hard. Mata, give me everything you can. We're turning this whore into ASH. Thought Yujito, as even her inner voice took on a demonic edge. You got it, kitten. Kill that sorry excuse for a mate stealer, was her demonic tenant's reply before her system was flooded with Matatabi's demonic chakra. Naruto was fighting the urge to cut Hinata into tiny little pieces. His anger had risen with every insult she directed at his girlfriend. But that last one was the straw that broke the camel's back. He was about to draw his blade when he felt the familiar demonic chakra of Matatabi start to leak out of Yujito. Abandoning all thoughts of killing the arrogant Hyuga heiress, Naruto forcibly removed his arm from her grasp and wrapped both of his arms around Yujito before using Shunshin to get them both out of the area so he could focus on calming her down. With Bee and Dodai, the two elite Kumo Jounin had been waiting at the main gate for Team 20 to meet them to start their training. They were just about to start roaming the village in search for them when they noticed a familiar mop of blonde hair approaching them. Smiling at the sight of their favorite Genin team, the two started towards them to meet them halfway. When they got within earshot of Team 20, they noticed that they seemed distracted, like they were trying to find something or someone. They soon realized the cause of their problem when a young girl about their age dropped down in front of Team 20. Even though they couldn't see her face, they knew that the young girl was a Hyuga just by the way she held herself. She had the patented superior Hyuga air around her, and she spoke like she was superior to everything and everyone around her. They watched and listened as the Hyuga girl greeted Naruto, but completely ignored the rest of Team 20's presence. When she wrapped herself around Naruto's arm, they were worried that Yujito would do something drastic in blind rage that another girl had the nerve to touch her boyfriend like. That way. They tensed when she started in on how she was superior to Yujito. They were worried that Naruto might end up being the one to do something instead of Yujito, and it would take everything they had, plus Darui, just to hold back the blonde. When she finished her rant, both men were already moving to interfere with the situation, knowing full well what Naruto would do to anyone who said that about Yujito. Before they could reach them, however, a spike in demonic chakra was the only warning they had before the two blondes of Team 20 vanished in a Shunshin. With the rest of Team 20, Darui and Karui breathed sighs of relief before turning their attention to the Hyuga heiress who had been unceremoniously dropped on her ass when Naruto pulled his arm from her grip. Glaring at the wide-eyed girl, Darui spoke with his voice laced with killing intent. Let this serve as your one and only warning. If you so much as come near my student like that again, I will personally end you. Though, there won't be much of you left after Yujito gets done with you in the finals. Hinata stood up and wiped the dirt off of her before turning to face the pissed Kumo Jounin. It doesn't matter what you say, Naruto-kun and I are fated to be together. We are both the heirs of our clans, and as such we are the only ones worthy of the other. His heritage as an Uzumaki and Namikaze is only matched by mine as a Hyuga, said Hinata as she turned and started making her way back to her clan compound. She was stopped, though, by a deep voice that for some reason sent a terrified shiver down her spine. I would heed Darui's words if I were you, girl. Heritage means nothing when it comes to love. Naruto and Yujito love each other with everything they are, and they don't take kindly to someone trying to separate them. They're the only thing that calm the other when one of them is truly pissed off. But when both of them are pissed, nothing will spare you their wrath, said Bee as he and Dodai walked up to stand next to Darui and Karui. Hinata just scoffed and starting on her way back to her clan compound, with only one thing on her mind. No matter what, Naruto-kun will be mine. The group of Kumo ninja side before Darui started leading them back to the Namikaze compound to wait for their favorite blondes to return, though that might not be for a while. Shonen Exam Stadium a month later. Team 20 stood facing the packed and restless audience that had shown up to watch the finals of the Chunin exams. With them were the rest of the Genin that managed to pass the prelims. Gaara and Temari hadn't changed at all over the month-long break. Gaara still wore his emotionless mask, while Temari had a confident smirk on her face. Shino was being the typical Aburame, calm, cool, and collected even in the face of such an important task about to take place. Like his fellow Konoha Genin, Shikamaru was being the typical lazy Nara, somehow managing to dose off while standing and take a quick nap. Niji and Hinata were also being the typical stereotype that their clan was known for, though for different reasons. Niji was glaring at Hinata out of the corner of his eyes. It seemed he still held a grudge against her in the main house. Hinata was openly glaring at Yujito. Ever since their little meeting in the village, Hinata had made no other attempts at Naruto, but there was something in her eyes that told them that she had something planned. Sasuke was also glaring at A, member of Team 20, though his attention was held by the lone shinobi of the team. It seemed Sasuke had found out how the seal that blocked his chakra got onto him, and he wasn't too happy about it. Everyone's attention was drawn to the Kage box as Hiruzen Sarutobi made his appearance along with two Umbu guards. Not long after the Hokage appeared, the Kazekage made his own entrance along with his own guard. However, it was the last one that appeared that held everyone's attention. Soon after the Kazekage took his seat, decided to make his own appearance along with Bee and Dodai as his guards. Kage box. Ah, welcome Lord Kage, Lord Rakage. I hope your journeys here were pleasant, said Sarutobi as the other two Kage nodded in acknowledgement. Indeed, it was Lord Hokage. I am very excited to see how these finals will play out, said the masked Kazekage. You're getting soft, old man. By the end of these exams, you will be dead, and I will be one step closer to obtaining the Sharingan, thought Orochimaru from behind his veil. Lord Kazekage is right. These exams should prove to be very interesting indeed, said A as he looked down at the arena to see all of Team 20 looking at him with determination in their eyes. Well, you brats managed to keep your promise about all of you being in the finals. Now make me and everyone in Kumo proud by becoming Chunin, thought the Rakage before he turned to see the Kazekage about to speak. I couldn't help but notice Lord Hokage that these exams seemed to have quite a selection of competitors. The heir to the Nara clan, the heir to the Aburame clan, the heiress of the Hyuga clan, and the most powerful branch Hyuga in generations, and of course the last Uchiha. An interesting combination indeed. A frown slightly. While he understood that his ninja weren't commonly known like the clans of Konoha, it still pissed him off when someone overlooked them because they don't have a prominent clan name. While I agree that there are many prominent clans represented here today, I also believe in the old saying a diamond in the rough. And I believe my village is being represented by 3 of them, said it with a smirk at Team 20. Sarutobi had to suppress a smirk at hearing this. You young fool. If only you had the experience to see underneath the underneath. Think what you want right now, but in a few months' times you will learn the truth, he thought before standing to address the crowd that had gathered and begin the exams. Welcome everyone to the finals of the Chunin selection exams. Before we begin, I would like to congratulate these young ninja on making it this far in the exams. Now, without further ado, let the tournament begin. Once the Hokage finished, the stadium erupted into cheers and applause. With Naruto's siblings. So Naruto's match is first, said Kurenai as she turned to face everyone else. Getting nods of agreement, she turned back to the arena where the proctor, Genma Shiranui, was speaking to the genin. I wonder how he'll do against Niji, what you think, Guy? Guy had an unusually serious expression on his normally smiling face. Over the month-long break, Guy hadn't had any contact with his team because of the mission they were on and because of the plans they had to come up with for leaving the village. Next to Guy, his mini-clone, Lee also had a serious expression on his face. He had been brought in on the plan because neither Guy nor Naruto could stand to leave without him. Naruto will have a tough fight ahead of him. He may be more powerful than Niji overall, but Niji is called a genius of the Jukin for a reason. I wouldn't put it past him to have something up his sleeve that not even his own clan knows of, said Guy as he watched the genin leave the field, leaving Naruto and Niji to fight the first round. Everyone nodded in agreement with Guy's analysis of the situation. They knew Naruto would definitely win, but the path to that victory would be a dangerous one. Well, little brother, now's your chance to show everyone exactly what you're mad of, said Kakashi as he watched Gema getting ready to start the match. In the arena. All right, the two of you ready? Asked Gema, getting a nod from both boys. Okay then, the first match, Naruto Namikaze versus Niji Hyuga. Begin, shouted Genma before jumping out of the way. Neither of them moved, each staring the other down for what seemed like hours. The silence was finally broken by Niji, who spoke with his usual superior Hyuga tone, though it was laced with venom and hatred. Finally, my chance to avenge my father has come. Once I defeat you, the only one left to deal with will be my pathetic excuse of a cousin. Prepare yourself. Only one of us will walk away from this match alive, and it won't be you. With that, Niji activated his Byakugan and charged Naruto with only one thought, to avenge his father's death by killing Naruto. Said Blonde immediately went on the defensive when he realized that Niji wasn't kidding. If the accuracy of his strikes and the places he was targeting were any indication, he really was trying to kill him. Naruto kept swerving in and out of Niji's strikes and redirecting those that he couldn't avoid. Deflecting another Juken strike to his chest, he saw an opening in Niji's guard and took it. Grabbing onto his opponent's wrist, Naruto pulled him in closer and delivered a massive knee to his stomach. Releasing his hold on him, Naruto jumped back to get some space between them before going through some hand signs. Wind style, Gale Palm Jutsu, said Naruto before thrusting his right palm out towards Niji, sending a violent gust of wind at the gasping Hyuga. Forcing himself to move despite the pain in his stomach, Niji barely managed to avoid getting struck by the attack. Righting himself, Niji slipped into the opening stance of the Juken and waited to see what Naruto's next move would be. It seems he's more skilled than even I gave him credit for, but I have figured out most of his skills. He has an affinity for lighting and wind-style jutsu, and large chakra reserves since he doesn't even seem the least bit drained from using so much in that last attack of his. I have to keep him from drawing his ninjato. If the technique he used in the prelims is any indication, he can easily defeat me if he were to use it. But I have the advantage in taijutsu. If I can manage to get him within my field of divination, this match will be over, thought Niji with a smirk before charging at Naruto once more. That took a while. He must have been analyzing my attack style. Too bad for him, he hasn't even seen half of my skills, thought Naruto as he started dodging the lethal strikes of the Juken once. Again. Oh well, enough playing defense. Time for some fun. Jumping out of Niji's range, Naruto made a familiar cross-hand sign before 3 clones appeared beside him. Smirking as one, the 4 Narutos vanished in an impressive burst of speed, only to reappear surrounding Niji on 4 sides. Going through hand signs, once more the 4 blondes finished in unison before launching their attacks at the Hyuga prodigy. Lightning style, Black Lightning Street. Ike, arms arcing with black lightning. Naruto and his clones raised their arms and 4 bolts of the lethal lightning shot at Niji, who seemed frozen in fear of the attack, no doubt remembering its effect from the prelims. Shaking off his temporary shock, Niji was forced to reveal one of the techniques he had learned over the month. Expelling chakra from every point on his body, Niji began rotating in place, forming a dome of chakra around him. Rotation, came the voice of Niji as the crowd watched in awe as the 4 bolts of lightning collided with his defense, causing a massive explosion to rock the arena. Everyone held their breath as they waited for the smoke to clear, only for it to reveal Naruto and Niji standing across from one another, unmoving. Despite being a branch Hyuga, you're able to perform the so-called ultimate defense of the main family. I must admit, I'm mildly impressed. You must have worked hard to achieve that technique, but you still won't win this match, said Naruto as he gazed into the glaring eyes of Niji's Byakugan. Said Hyuga's scowl depended when he heard this, causing the veins around his eyes to bulge more. It doesn't matter what you say. Fate has already decided the outcome of this match, and it shall end with your death, screamed an enraged Niji before he slipped into a strange stance, crouched slightly with one arm out in front of him with the other raised behind him. You are in the range of my divination. With Hayashi and the Hyuga elders. It can't be. How can a branch member have possibly learned those techniques? Asked a random Hyuga elder as the others started whispering in agreement. While all of this was going on around him, Hayashi was staring at his nephew with a frown on his face. Is this what you truly seek, Niji? Is avenging your father all that matters to you? Thought Hayashi as he glanced at the competitor's box. More precisely, a certain Uchiha. It would seem revenge has become a common trait in this year's Genin. With Naruto's siblings. Naruto is in trouble if this attack hits, said Guy as he watched the fight with a growing frown on his face. How could I have missed Niji's thirst for revenge so easily? The signs were all there, and yet I never noticed. It seems Kakashi wasn't the only one who had an Avenger on their squad. What do you mean, Guy? What is that attack? Asked Anko as she glanced at her little brother, worry evident in her eyes, before turning back to Guy as he began to explain. The stance Niji took is the opening stance for one of the Hyuga clan's most feared techniques, the 8 trigrams, 64 palms. The technique attacks the 64 most vital chakra points on the body and closes them off. If Niji lands this attack, then this match will be turned into a pure taijutsu brawl, putting Naruto at a major disadvantage. This is, if he can even stand after the attack, said Guy in a somber tone. Everyone else turned shocked and slightly fearful eyes back to their favorite blonde shinobi. Come on, Naruto. I know you can pull this off, thought Darui as he watched his successor prepare for the attack. In the arena, Naruto didn't have time to react before Niji was on him and launching a barrage of strikes at his body. With a cry of 2 palm, he felt 2 of his chakra points being closed off. 4 palms, said Niji as he continued his attack. 8 palms, 16 palms, 32 palms. Niji's hands were a blur as he began the last part of his attack. Thrusting his palm into Naruto's chest, Niji smirked before calling out the end of his attack, 64 palms. Naruto was launched back into the wall, causing a large cloud of dust to erupt from the point of impact, obscuring his body from view. Everybody held their breath as they watched the smoke from the impact slowly dissipate. Naruto's siblings were worried. No matter how strong he was, that attack would take a lot out of him. Come on, Naruto. Please be all right, was the collective thought of the Jounin in Naruto's corner. Karui was concerned. She knew that her team could take hit, but that last attack was pushing it. Glancing over at her female teammate, she was surprised to see the girl casually leaning against the rail while staring intently at the part of the wall Naruto was launched into. Raising an eyebrow, she turned to look at where their teammate had been launched and had to stifle a gasp at what she saw. Kagebox. No, Naruto, screamed Sarutobi in his head as he watched the limp form of the person he thought of as a grandson slowly appear as the smoke dissipated. Turning slightly so he could judge the Raikage reaction to this turn of events, he was horrified when he saw a smirk on the face of the Raikage and his guards. They don't even care if he's alive. Those bastards will pay for this. But watched as the smoke cleared slowly, revealing the form of his most promising genin. Smirking at what he knew was coming next, he had one last thought before turning his full attention back to the fight. The looks on everybody's faces are going to be so priceless. In the arena, same time, Niji was smirking at the results his attack had caused. If he somehow survived that attack, then he'll be a sitting duck for me to finish. As the smoke finally cleared, the sight that greeted Niji only served to increase his smirk. There in the center of a small crater in the wall, half of his body embedded into it, was a bruised and bleeding Naruto. His arms were covered in tiny red spots, indicating where Niji's strikes had closed off his chakra points. Blood dripped from the corners of his mouth onto his chest. His black sleeveless shirt looked eerily similar to the one that he was wearing. when Bee and Darui found him all those years ago. His torso was covered in numerous dots like the ones that littered his arms, and in the center of his abdomen, visible for all to see, was the familiar seal that held Kurama inside of him. Turning to Niji, Genma was about to call the match when noise brought everybody's attention back to the blonde that was supposedly unconscious. Slowly lifting his head, Naruto smirked at Niji's shocked face before pulling himself out of the wall and collapsing to one knee. Breathing deeply, Naruto spit out the blood in his mouth before ripping what was left of his shirt off, drawing blushes from many of the female population present. Righting himself, though wobbly, Naruto brought his left hand up into a half ram sign to help focus his chakra. This movement seemed to snap Niji out of his shocked stupor as his eyes took on the superior Hyuga look again. "It's useless. I have blocked your main chakra points. Your chakra is useless to you," said Niji with a confident smirk. Said smirk was replaced with a frown when Naruto grew one of his infamous fox smirks as wind started to whirl around him. Everyone was forced to cover their face as the wind around Naruto started to get faster and faster. The civilians watched in awe, while the shinobi watched in shock as red chakra slowly spread over the young blonde's body. The red spots all over his body started fading, as his chakra points were reopened by the force of the chakra moving through his system. Niji had his Byakugan activated and watched in shock as Naruto's chakra points were reopened by the fiery red chakra that spread throughout his body from the seal on his stomach. That's impossible. Where is this chakra coming from? Thought Niji as a fox head formed from the red chakra appeared over the boy's body. Wah, what is he? Thought Niji in fear as he saw all of the wounds and damage his attack had caused heal almost instantly as the amount of the red chakra in the blonde system kept rising. Naruto's features started to turn feral as his cloak formed with one chakra tail swinging behind him. His nails lengthened into claws, while his canines elongated into fangs. His whisker marks deepened, and his hair became even spikier than it normally was. Opening his eyes drew gasps of shock, recognition, but mostly fear from the citizens and shinobi of Konoha. They knew those eyes all too well. They were the eyes that haunted the nightmares of everyone who had seen the Kyuubi's attack 13 years ago. The eyes combined with the familiar feeling of death and bloodlust that filled the air was enough to force many of the civilians to faint from fear, while the shinobi fought to remain still in their seats. With the Hokage. There's no mistaking it. This is the chakra of the nine-tailed fox. But when did Naruto learn to harness its power? Thought Sarutobi in shock as he watched Naruto do what should be impossible, control the chakra of the most powerful bijou in existence. In the arena. Don't even think of calling this match Proctor. It's just beginning, said Naruto, with a demonic edge to his voice. Genma had to fight the urge to run at the sight of the boy, but hearing him speak in. That voice was too much. Giving a quick nod in acknowledgement, Genma shunshin to the top of the stadium wall, well out of reach of the two genin. Now then, you had your shot. Now it's my turn. With that, Naruto vanished from sight, only to reappear with his foot buried in Niji's abdomen. Said prodigy was sent rocketing backward at speeds that impressed even Guy, but before he could do anything to recover, was sent rocketing towards the sky with a solid kick to the chin from the Kyuubi-fied blonde. Naruto again vanished from sight and reappeared a little above Niji before bringing his leg up and sending Niji plummeting to the unforgiving earth with a massive axe kick to the stomach. The stadium shook with the force of Niji hitting the ground. Many of the shinobi thought the match was over and that Niji was most likely dead with the amount of force he hit with. Naruto landed a ways away from the small crater that had formed upon Niji's impact. Noticing movement out of the corner of his eye, Naruto turned a cold glare on Gunma, who froze in fear at the look he was getting. Naruto shook his head to stop the man from interfering and to let the match go on. Gunma's worry soon turned into shock when he saw Niji standing in the middle of the crater panting. No one could believe what they were seeing. Niji had somehow survived an attack that would have killed any other man on impact. Silence overcame the stadium, with the only sound being that of Niji's panting. The silence seemed to last an eternity until it was broken by the demonic voice of one Naruto Namikaze. Impressive use of the rotation, Niji, said Naruto, as realization took place of shock on the face of every ninja in attendance. With Naruto's siblings. I'll admit one thing about that Hyuga brat. He's clever, that's for sure, said Darui as he watched his only male student stare down the prodigy of the Hyuga clan. Yeah, the kid sure earned his title as a genius with that move, said Anko as she smirked at the form of her little brother. Damn, with a body like that, I bet he's a lady killer back in Kumo. Am I right? She said with a wiggle of her eyebrows. Chuckling softly under his breath, Darui met Anko's eye before smirking slightly, causing an almost unnoticeable blush to spread across her face. You have no idea. He's got his own club of fangirls that follows him around. In the arena. I think it's about time we end this little match of ours, don't you? Said Naruto, as he held out his right hand and started to concentrate his regular chakra into it. This one's for you, Dad, thought Naruto, as he started to spin his chakra in random directions while compressing it into a small sphere. Every Konoha ninja present couldn't believe what they were seeing, with the exception of Naruto's siblings. In Naruto's hand was the ultimate jutsu of shape manipulation, one of the prized techniques of the fourth Hokage himself, the Rasengan. Naruto launched forward with the deadly jutsu in hand, with the full intention of blowing Niji into the opposite wall. Seeing the oncoming attack that would surely kill him where he stood, Niji pulled on every last bit of chakra he had in him and began rotating again. Time seemed as slow as the two. Rotating techniques drew closer, one defensive, the other offensive. When the two finally met, they seemed to be evenly matched at first, until the wild rotation of the Rasengan began to take over the chakra dome. Niji's screams of pain could be heard all throughout the village as his own chakra began to spin wildly around him, cutting into him in random locations. This continued for a few seconds before the technique began to die down. The sight that greeted them had most of the civilians vomiting up their last meal, while the ninja present grimaced. Lying in a pool of its own blood was the mangled body of Niji Hyuga. Cuts littered his body, ranging from small scratches to large gashes. His right arm was severed completely from his body. Two large gashes forming an X on his chest were spilling his blood like a river, making his complexion pale drastically as time went on. Genma had already called for medics when the two attacks met, and had Shunshin next to Niji's body to check for a pulse. Finding none, the special Jounin sighed before he stood up to address the crowd. Winner by death, Naruto Namikaze. Silence reigned after Genma's announcement, only to be broken by the sound of clapping coming from Naruto's siblings and teammates. Letting his chakra cloak recede, Naruto made his way up to the competitor's box, eager to get his reward his girlfriend promised him for winning his match. Kage box. Sarutobi sat transfixed at the sight before him. If he thought watching Naruto kill in the prelims shook him, that was nothing compared to what he was feeling now. There were drastic differences between Naruto's kill in the prelims and his kill just now. First was that in the preliminaries the kill had been clean and efficient. There was no blood then, and young Sai had died instantly. Now though, Naruto had killed his opponent slowly and painfully, using Niji's own chakra to cut into his body repeatedly and cause unimaginable amounts of pain, while simultaneously prolonging the poor Hyuga's agony. The second thing was that Sai had been an unknown from the academy, no family to speak of, and no one close enough to the boy to consider a friend. Niji, while albeit the branch house, was from the Hyuga clan, the most powerful clan in Konoha at the moment. While they couldn't do anything to attack the boy legally, he knew that when Naruto returned to the village, he would be resented by the branch members, with Naruto's siblings. Well, that's one target down, 2 to go, said Kakashi as the other Jounin nodded in agreement. It looks like your plan is going smoothly, little brother. Let's just hope your clones can complete their part of the plan in time. True, but don't forget that other two will not be so easy to remove. The Uchiha is the last of his clan that is loyal to the village, and most of the Konoha citizens would rather the village be destroyed than give up their almighty Sharingan, said Darui, with sarcasm clear in his voice. Guy and Lee couldn't help but chuckle at that comment. Being the only two people in the village that knew how to negate the ocular attacks of the Sharingan allowed them to see all of the flaws in the so-called legendary dojutsu. Also, I have a feeling that the Hyuga heiress will be a pain in our side for a long time to come, said the laid-back Jounin as he watched Genma call down the Uchiha and the Aburame for the second match. I still don't like this part of the plan. There are too many things that could go wrong. Not to mention the fact that if this part succeeds, then Naruto and Yujito will be made major targets in the eyes of the Konoha shinobi, said a worried Kurenai as she glanced over at the competitor's box and saw her little brother talking quietly with his teammates. I feel the same, Kurenai, but we have to believe in Naruto. Don't forget what he told us after we got back from our mission, said Anko as she wrapped her arm around her best friend and tried to comfort her. I know, Anko, but I still can't help but worry, said Kurenai, as she thought back to the night a few days ago when Naruto explained how the final phase of his plan was going to happen. Flashback, 3 days ago. How'd things go on the mission? Asked Naruto as he sat across from his siblings with his team, mates on either side of him. Kakashi and the others had just returned from their mission to track down and eliminate Aoi Rokusho and to return the Raijin to Naruto. Judging by their appearances, things had gone relatively smoothly. Kakashi looked a little disheveled with a few nicks and scratches along his arms. Guy's spandex suit was burnt in a couple of places, showing where Aoi had come close to getting in a couple of strikes. Kurenai and Anko were relatively unharmed, with only minor scratches here and there. Hade, on the other hand, was covered in larger scratches, and he had some minor burns on his hands and arms, most likely from where he crossed blades with Aoi. Fairly well. It took us a while to track Aoi down, and after we managed to find him, he took off the second he got word of Konoha ninja in the area. We followed him for a few more days before we finally caught up to him at the border of grass country and rain country. He put up a good fight, considering he was outnumbered 5-1, but Hate managed to disarm him, literally, and finished him off with a stab to the heart, said Kurenai, causing Hate to blush a little at the praise. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this, before turning to wink at his team, mates with a smirk on his face. If those two get together, I might be an uncle before I turn 15. So, I take it you retrieve the Raijin? Naturally, said Kakashi before he unclipped one of the slots on his vest and pulled out a small sealing scroll and tossing it to Naruto. Unrolling the scroll, Naruto quickly released storage seal revealing the one and only Raijin. Slowly lifting the metal handle as if it were made of fragile glass, Naruto could only stare at one of the weapons that had once defended one of his clans. Everyone around him couldn't help the small smiles that spread across their lips. To see someone they each cared deeply for finally have a physical connection to his lost family was heartwarming, to say the least. Snapping out of his stupor, Naruto resealed the Raijin and put the scroll in his weapon's pouch before turning his attention back to his siblings, teammates, and sensei. All right, Phase 3 of the plan is officially complete, said Naruto as everyone present nodded. It's time we began preparations for the fourth and final phase. A fourth phase? You only told us about the first 3 phases, said a confused guy as his fellow Jounin all nodded in agreement, looks of confusion on their faces as well. At this, Naruto shared a concerned glance with his sensei and team mates before turning to face his siblings, whose looks of confusion were now mixed with concern. They're not going to like this one little bit, thought Naruto as he braced himself for siblings' reaction to this part of his plan. Well, the fourth phase is something that will deal some major damage to Konoha as well as by us and Kumo sometime to prepare for what will come later. On their way here, Bee and Dodai found something disturbing that has confirmed some of our suspicions, said Naruto as he gestured to Dodai and Bee to take over. As Naruto said, Bee and I found something very unsettling. The body of the Kazekage and his guards were lying in a ditch about 10 miles out from Konoha's western gate, said Dodai, shocking Naruto's siblings that someone had managed to kill the Kazekage. However, what is more concerning is that his face was stolen from him. This confirmed our suspicions that Orochimaru is planning an invasion of Konoha along with Suna. This got some startled gasps from the former Konoha Jounin. They knew that Orochimaru was in Konoha for a reason, but they never suspected that he would try and invade Konoha during the Chunin exams. What could Orochimaru possibly want now, of all times? Asked Kurenai, as she had a sinking feeling that the next phase of Naruto's plan involved this invasion. What he has always wanted, the Sharingan, said Naruto, bringing looks of understanding to his siblings. If there was anything that a person like Orochimaru would do anything to have, it would be the Sharingan. If Phase 4 is completely successful, then it will deal a crippling blow to Konoha while also setting Orochimaru's plans back a while. Phase 4 will revolve around what our team was originally created for: assault and assassination. During the finals, Karui, Yujito-chan, and I will do everything we can to ensure that Sasuke Uchiha, Hinata Hyuga, and Neji Hyuga don't survive the event. Naruto's siblings raised an eyebrow at this. They could understand Sasuke and Hinata, but Neji was a surprise. Sensing his siblings' confusion, Naruto continued in his explanation. With these three out of the picture, it would remove a huge threat to us and Kumo. With the last pure-blooded Sharingan wielder in Konoha dead, the Uchiha clan can never be revived in this hellhole of a village. That alone will bring the morale of Konoha's ninja down dramatically. However, if we kill the so-called prodigy of the Hyuga clan and the Hyuga heiress, it would be years before Konoha would be back to full strength, both militarily and mentally. While that's true, Naruto, it also has a danger side effect. It would place you, Yujito and Karui, at the top of Konoha's most hated enemies, probably rivaling Orochimaru in that essence, said Kakashi, while the rest of the former Konoha Jounin nodded in agreement. I've thought of that, Kakashi, but it will take time for Konoha to recover from the invasion that will happen and the loss of 3 such promising genin. With the time it would take a village to recover from that kind of loss, it will be years before they can even think of exacting their revenge, said Naruto, as Kakashi nodded in understanding, knowing from first-hand experience the time it takes to recover from such a blow. Wait, Naruto, how do you know Konoha will even survive this invasion? If the village doesn't survive the invasion, then we don't even have to worry about someone coming after the 3 of you, asked Kurenai, as she couldn't understand why her little brother was talking about future plans concerning Konoha when there might not even be a Konoha after the invasion. Naruto smirked at this, a very dark smirk that could make even Kurama himself shiver in fear and anticipation at the mere sight of it. Because sis, we're going to make sure Konoha survives the invasion. Flashback end. I still can't believe that Naruto wants to make sure that Konoha survives the invasion, said Kurenai as she watched as Sasuke use his fireball jutsu to incinerate a swarm of Shino's bugs. Neither can I. But then again, since when have we been able to understand what goes on in Naruto's head? Asked Darui with a smirk, getting chuckle from the shinobi present and giggles from the kunoichi. True, we may not know what goes on inside his head, and it's probably a good thing we don't, but he's never lead us wrong, has he? Said Guy as the other Jounin all nodded in agreement. Looks like Sasuke won his match, he said, returning everyone's attention to the match that had just finished. With Naruto, Yujito, and Karui. Looks like the emo won, said Yujito from her place, sitting on the railing. Her teammates nodded in agreement as they watched Sasuke walk back to the competitor's box, while medics took a burned Shino away to be treated. All according to plan. All right, Karui, you're up. Remember, we need to cause as much panic as possible to keep the Konoha shinobi on guard, so they're ready for the invasion, said Naruto, as Karui nodded in agreement before jumping over the rail when Genma called for her and Gaara to come down for their match. After Karui jumped down for her match, Yujito turned a concerned look towards her boyfriend. Do you think she'll be all right? She asked with worry lacing her voice. Karui may have been a strong and fierce kunoichi, but she was just that, a regular kunoichi. There was no way she could stand up to a Jinchuriki, even if it was the Jinchuriki of the weakest Bijou. She'll be fine, Yujito-chan. Karui's a stubborn one. She won't go down easily, said Naruto with a smirk as he watched his team mates stare down the red-haired Jinchuriki. Noticing that his girlfriend was still looking at their team mate with worry and concern, he stepped up next to her and wrapped his right arm around her waist, pulling her to him. If it looks like things are getting out of hand and she might be killed, we'll personally step in and stop it. Okay? He said, causing Yujito to give him a small smile and nodded in agreement before resting her head on his shoulder and relaxing her muscles. In the stands, Lord Orochimaru said he wanted to start the invasion during the Ichibi's match, but he was hoping it would be against the Uchiha, thought a disguised Umbu as he glanced over at the Kage box, specifically at the disguised Kazekage. It seemed that the imposter felt eyes on him because not a second after the disguised Umbu looked at him, the Kazekage made eye contact with him. Taking this as a sign to begin, the Umbu was about to place his Jinjutsu on the crowd before the Kazekage. Move his hand slightly, signaling him to hold off on placing the Jinjutsu. What could Lord Orochimaru be waiting for? Does he want Sasuke to fight the Ichibi before we start the invasion? Thought the Umbu with a confused expression hidden behind his mask. In the arena. The third match, Karui versus Gaara of the Desert. Are the both of you ready? Asked Genma as he chewed on his senbon. Karui nodded with a determined look in her eyes, while Gaara simply uncorked his guard and let his sand start to surround him. Raising his arm, Genma brought it down before jumping back out of the way of the two Genin. Begin! Gaara didn't waste any time and immediately sent his sand at Karui, planning on crushing her into oblivion before she had a chance to do anything. Just like Naruto said, he hangs back and simply lets his sand do all the fighting for him. Thought Karui before jumping out of the way of the incoming sand and throwing a couple of shuriken at a gap in Gaara's sand. Said gap immediately closed before the shuriken could even get close, and they embedded themselves deep into the sand. Before Karui had a chance to try another attack, a clone of Gaara appeared out of the sand and threw the shuriken back at her, forcing her to backflip to avoid getting impaled by the shuriken. A sand clone. Well, it looks like Mr. Emotionless has more control over that sand of his than we first thought. Alright then, let's see how he handles this, thought Karui before she went through a quick series of hand signs before finishing in the bird sign. Water style, water bullet jutsu, she said before launching 5 medium-sized globs of water at Gaara, who had yet to move since the match started. As expected, Gaara's sand came to his defense and wrapped itself around him, forming a dome-shaped defense. Now, just before the water bullets were going to impact the sand dome, Karui cut the flow of chakra, holding the water together, and watched as the water soaked the sand. Said dome defense fell and launched itself at Karui once again, only this time at a slightly slower speed. With the Jounin. Clever girl, said Kakashi as he watched the sand continue its assault on Karui, who kept dodging and occasionally throwing a few kunai or shuriken. What did she do that's clever this time, Kakashi? Asked Hate as he turned to look at his cycloptic brother. The rest of the Jounin all turned to him for an explanation, all except Darui, who had a smirk on his face as he watched his student do battle against the Shikaku Jinchuriki. Something similar to what she did in the prelims when she immobilized Misumi, but instead of pushing lightning-based chakra out of her body, she pulled the chakra she was using to hold the water bullets together back in her body, causing the jutsu to collapse and the water to lose form and soak a good portion of the sand dome. If you look carefully at the sand, it's moving slower than it was when the match first started, said Kakashi as the others nodded in understanding and returned their attention to the match. With Naruto and Yujito. Good job, Karui. Just a little longer, said Naruto, quietly, so only Yujito could hear him. Lifting her head from her boyfriend's shoulder slightly, Yujito turned to Naruto with a smirk playing on her lips. When do you think she'll forfeit and reveal what Gaara really is to everyone? she asked before turning back to watch as their team. Mei fired a few more water bullets and again cut the chakra flow to them before they impacted with Gaara's defense. She'll most likely do it after she lands a direct hit on Gaara. From what Kurama and Matatabi told us, Shikaka doesn't like it when his host is injured, and whenever they're injured, he starts pumping their system full of more and more of his chakra, causing them to lose whatever sanity they have left and just kill. When that happens, that's when we'll step in and flare Kurama's and Matatabi's chakra to scare Shikako off from attacking Karui, said Naruto as he watched Karui dodge the sand attacks from Gaara, which were moving at about half the speed they were when the match started. Kage Box. It seems that your young Kunoichi is having a little bit of trouble with her opponent, said Sarutobi with a small smirk as he faced the young Reikage. Said Shinobi looked at the aged Kage with a frown that quickly turned into a smirk, causing Sarutobi to frown. No, she's not. She's just testing the waters, so to speak, but once she's ready, you'll see what a real Kunoichi in training is like. Not like those Uchiha fangirls I've heard about that were supposedly two of the top Kunoichi in this year's class, said it with his smirk growing at the end and causing smirks to appear on Bee and Dodai's faces as well. The old Hokage's frown only deepened when he mentioned that as he took it as an insult to their village's ability to train future ninja. The Kazekage, who had remained quiet throughout the conversation, was staring intently at the match as it progressed. It seems this Karui is more talented than I first thought. I better make sure she and her team don't survive the invasion. They could prove to be a problem later on down the line, thought the phony Kage as he discreetly signaled one of his guards to relay a command to the invasion force. Eliminate all Kumo ninja in the village. In the arena. What's happening? Something doesn't feel right, thought Gaara as he continued to direct his sand to attack the elusive Kumo Kunoichi. Said Kunoichi flipped over another wave of sand and sprinted up the stadium wall before launching a volley of kunai at Gaara. As expected, the sand came to Gaara's defense, but this time at a much slower speed, allowing for one of the kunai to graze Gaara's left cheek. Time seemed to freeze for a moment, as those that knew Gaara watched with shocked expressions that somehow had actually pierced his ultimate defense. However, instead of blood dripping from the cut, sand started to leak out. What is that? Some kind of armor, thought a shocked Karui. Well, this changes things, she thought before she draw her katana and charge her lightning chakra into it, and shaping it into a small serrated edge along the blade. Well, let's see how this works, thought the fiery Kunoichi before she jumped from her place on the arena wall and slashed at. The stationary form of Gaara. Kumo style. Lightning saw, she said as she launched a flying saw of pure lightning chakra at Gaara and watched as the sand once again came to his defense. Although, instead of catching or blocking. The attack, like everyone expected, the electric field surrounding the saw arced and immobilized the sand defense. With the sand defense virtually useless, the lightning saw easily cut through the sand that had managed to surround the stunned Gaara and continued on its deadly path towards the Ichibi Jinchuriki. Gaara stood stunned that his defense had failed him for a second time that day. He was so stunned that he just barely managed to avoid the lethal attack, though he didn't get away unscathed. Landing on the other side of the arena, Gaara cradled his now useless left arm. From his wrist to his shoulder, and large, cauterized gash was clearly visible for everyone to see. Gaara himself stared at his arm with complete shock at being injured. A single drop of blood fell from the injury and landed in his hand. Bringing his hand to his face, he stared at the red liquid in disbelief. What is this? He thought in shock. Blood. My blood. Suddenly the arena became enveloped in a feeling of death and destruction as Gaara got a crazed look in his eyes and his sand began to swirl around him at increasing speeds. Blood! My blood! He roared, his voice taking on a demonic edge as his sand began to envelope him in a cocoon. Now, thought Naruto and Yujito before they blurred from the other Jin in sight and appeared in front of Karui before they were both covered in their demonic cloaks. All life seemed to stop as the village was bathed in the demonic aura of not one, but three of the Bijou. one of them being the strongest one in existence. The civilians had felt uneasy with the demonic aura of Shikaku alone, but when they felt the familiar aura of death that only the Kyuubi could produce, combined with a third aura, they immediately passed out. The ninja that were in attendance were fighting with everything they had not to pass out, while those that had witnessed and fought in the Kyuubi attack were shaking with fear. Kagebox. That girl, she's a Jinchuriki too? Thought the Hokage in shock as he watched his grandson and the Kumo slut flare the demonic chakra that could only belong to a bijou. Taking a quick glance at his fellow Kages, Sarutobi was surprised when he saw their reactions. The Kazekage was shaking slightly with his eyes wide and surprised, although if one looked close enough they could see the faint outline of a smirk behind his veil-hidden face. Himself was smirking at the scene going on in the arena, with his bodyguards smirking along with him. What could they possibly find entertaining about this situation? Thought Sarutobi as he stared at the 3 Jinchuriki down in the arena. In the arena. That's enough, Shikaku, said Naruto with his voice on a demonic edge of its own. Gaara looked at the 2 people in front of him in surprise before he was enveloped in his own demonic cloak, with his eyes turning a gold color with a star pupil and 4 black dots around it. Kurama Matatabi asked the Shikakified Gaara, his voice becoming even more demonic. Yes, Shikaku, said Yujito before she turned a harsh glare on the red-haired host. Now would you care to explain why you were trying to kill our teammate? At the mention of Karui, Shikaku's eyes blazed with fury. She attacked me and my host. She managed to injure my host. She needs to die, he screamed as he attempted to use his sand to attack the redhead behind the 2 Kumo Jinchuriki. Unfortunately for Shikaku, before his sand had a chance to get near his target, a chakra tail shot from behind Naruto and scattered the sand. We will give you one warning, Shikaku. She is our teammate, and if you even think of attacking her, you will have us to deal with, said Naruto, as he flared more Kurama's chakra to get his point across. Shikaku recoiled when he felt the increase in Kurama's chakra coming from the blonde-haired host. Acting quickly, he nodded his head rapidly and mentally swore to himself never to cross his fellow bijou ever again. Good, then our task here is done. Remember, Shikaku will be watching you. With that, Naruto and Yujito let their cloaks fall before blurring away and returning to their places in the competitor's box. Shikaku quit pumping his chakra into his host, letting the cloak around him fall and returning control to Gaara. Karui smirked at seeing many of the civilians starting to come around now that the demonic aura had receded. Her smirk turned feral when she noticed Genma out of the corner of her eye. Turning to him, she raised her hand. Proctor, I forfeit. There's no way I can hope to stand up to someone who holds a bijou inside of themselves. The second she said this, looks of shock appeared on Genma's and Gaara's faces, as well as the faces of everyone in the stands. Genma barely managed to nod his head and declare Gaara the winner before all hell broke loose in the stands as civilians began cursing Gaara for existing, while the ninja present were doing everything they could to keep the civilians from causing any more trouble than they already were. While all of this was going on, no one noticed the smirks that appeared on the faces of all the Kumo ninja as they enjoyed the show that was going on. All according to plan was the simultaneous thought that went through each of their heads as they readied themselves for the invasion that was just on the horizon.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.